Coming up on today's show, we are going to look at some Uwazurike replacements for the Broncos after the second-year defensive tackle was suspended indefinitely for 365 days. Before we look at some replacement options, let's talk about the biggest news item, if you will, in Denver right now, and that is the new alternate helmets have been released. And mark me down as a big fan. If I'm giving it a letter grade, I'm giving it an A. It's a nod to the state's, environmental background with the whiteout, with a nod, like I said, to the white-capped mountains in Denver and in Colorado specifically, all across the state. But also you're getting that nice throwback Denver D with a bucking Bronco coming out the middle of it, a logo that's one of the more underappreciated nationwide throwback logos, if you will. And then you got the stripe over the top of the helmet. I mean, you guys can see it for yourselves. I'm a big fan. And they're going to wear it with their alternate uniforms, the orange one. So haven't seen any games announced that they're wearing it for just yet. Probably going to see it for 2, maybe 3 games. I doubt they just do 1. There's just been so much anticipation for these new alternate helmets. It would feel like a bit of, a deflating balloon if they only did it for 1 game. So hopefully we get it for at least 2 games this season. It would be 2 home games. I mean, off the top of my head, home games, that could be fun. Not going to do it week 1 against the Raiders. Like, you don't want, a kind of, I would say distraction, but another storyline added to the first game. Don't have that be the center of conversation. Don't have people being distracted even the slightest bit for the Raiders. Chiefs could be fun. Chargers could be fun. What about the Vikings? Sunday Night Football at home after the Bills game? Yeah, mark me down right now. Sean Payton, I know you're watching, so take some notes. Get a pen and paper out, please. I would like for the Vikings game to be a throwback uniform game. So just jot that down so you don't forget. But let me know, do you like the new uniforms, and do you want new uniforms? I mean, do you like the new helmet? Sure, but do you want new uniforms? Because I do think this might be a snowball effect where Damani Leach, the team president, is going to get a bit of a pulse of Broncos Country and go, all right, pretty good reception to the new alternate helmets. Maybe this could turn into some new uniforms down the road. Now let's get on to some Uwazurike replacement options. And option number 1 for replacing the former Iowa State Cyclone is internal, right? Looking interior, looking at your own depth chart and looking at your own roster and seeing what you have in the backyard as for who could step up and take his spot. And when we look at the depth chart, I don't think was going to be a starting job. Maybe if he had a great training camp, sure. I don't think Jonathan Harris or Matt Henningsen or Tyler Lancaster has cemented themselves as a starting player. After Zach Allen and DJ Jones, no one really has in my eyes. But there are some guys on this roster who could step up into that role and take what was supposed to be a bit of a sophomore leap. Tyler Lancaster is one name to keep an eye on. He was just signed a few months ago. He missed all of last season after getting hurt in training camp with the Raiders. But prior to that with the Green Bay Packers, sure, the stats don't really jump out to you, but he's not playing a position where he's going to have a bunch of great stats, right? He's a 1 to 3 technique defensive tackle who's going to clog up the middle of the offensive line and free up linebackers to do their job. So Lancaster is a name to keep an eye on. Matt Henningsen, a late day 3 draft pick from Wisconsin last year. He kind of turned his game on towards the second half of the season. Finished with 21 tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. I've seen some people already pencil him in as a starter. I truthfully don't have an answer for you as to who this week 1 starter will be next to DJ Jones. We can all make predictions, but I don't think anyone can concretely say this is going to be your starter and here are 5 reasons why or something. And then your final replacement option, I don't know if we really call it a replacement actually the more I talk about it, but Jonathan Harris, just because Uwazurike was trying to replace Jonathan Harris in this starting role. But Harris has been a guy who's lived out of his suitcase. He's bounced around the league. Last year with Denver, he missed some time due to injury, limited to about half the season. But Harris is someone who could be in line for maybe a bigger workload than expected now that Uwazurike is not in that rotation. Before we get on to the rest of the replacement options, I just want to give some shout-outs really quickly to our recent subscribers. Really appreciate everyone who has subscribed to the channel and helped us grow. The Beast Viper, Austin Delie, Teddy Kearney, Orange Crush 7, and Mark Johnson. Sorry for the names I pretty much butchered in the middle there, but hey, shout out to everyone who has subscribed. And if you want to get a shout out on a future show, subscribe, and we're all about giving back here at the Broncos Breakdown. Now, the second option, and albeit the more fun option, or at least the more exciting one, is free agency, because fans of every team in every professional sports league always want to look external, always want to see if there's a bigger, better name on the street that their team could sign and bring onto their roster. So here are some free agent defensive tackles. We talked about this in yesterday's video. Shelby Harris, who we'll look at. Matt Ioannidis, he was with the Washington, I think he might have been a Redskin, football team, and maybe he was not a Commander. So he's been two things, I think, in Washington. But most recently with the Carolina Panthers, he's a really solid defensive tackle. Frankly, I'm surprised he's still a free agent. But Shelby Harris is a name to keep an eye on because, of course, he knows a thing or two about this team, playing with the Broncos for a long stretch of time. He was even their sack leader not too long ago. In his final season in Denver, he posted 6 sacks and 7 tackles for loss. Someone who's always been pretty reliable, I could say. I mean, you're not going to find a lot of guys out there that have never missed a game. Otherwise, they probably would have been signed at this point. But you can see he's played a lot of football over the last 4 seasons. But last year in Seattle, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. I don't have a good reason for you as to why Shelby Harris is unsigned. I mean, PFF is not the end-all, be-all. But when they've got someone ranked in the top 20 for interior defensive linemen out of 127 qualifying players, sure, being 31 years old doesn't help. But I'm inclined to believe that even if PFF has a 10%, range of margin of error, and he's not 17, but he's closer to 30 in NFL GM's eyes, finding a top 30 defensive tackle from last year still on the market is pretty appealing to me. So I would love to see a Shelby Harris reunion in Denver, but let me know what your thoughts are. Should the Broncos bring back Shelby Harris? S for sign or P for pass? If you think it's time to move on and close that chapter, fine, but you know what? I think Shelby Harris has some good football left in the tank. And the defensive line is a group that I have some questions about. Like, the big question in Denver, of course, is can Sean Payton turn around Russell Wilson? That's all great and dandy, and that's the biggest question. But if we're really getting into the nitty-gritty and getting into the weeds on this, is this defensive line going to have any bite to it, or is it all bark? Because Zach Allen only has a career-high of 5.5 sacks in the season. DJ Jones was average last year, probably not as, living up to the billing as to what he was paid in free agency. And then there's a big question mark as to who's that next starting defensive lineman in a 3-4 front. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. The other guys we talked about, I should verbalize Ndamukong Suh. He's just a big name at this point. I don't think he'll sign anywhere during training camp. He probably doesn't want to be working out under the hot August sun. But Matthew Ioannidis last year, 5 tackles for loss, 1 sack. Chris Wormley's a guy who, like Uwazurike, has a lot of versatility and has bounced around the defensive line. William Golston is more of your traditional defensive end. He had 4 tackles for loss, last year with the Buccaneers, but he can be a really good defensive end to set the edge for offensive linemen. I think the Broncos ultimately are going to just be hawks on the NFL transaction wire, and they will be monitoring cuts league-wide. Now, this year, there is no set date of going from 90 to 85, 85 to 80. You just got to go from 90 to 53. So you're probably going to see cuts slowly trickle out league-wide when players aren't looking the part or teams know, hey, you're not going to make this roster, so we're actually going to do you a solid. We're going to release you now. That way other teams have an opportunity to look at some of your tape and some of your film and make a decision and not have it be some chaotic mad rush in September on that 53-man roster cut down day. So keep an eye on that transaction wire, as the Broncos will surely be monitoring other teams' second and third string defensive linemen. Before we get on to our third option for replacing Uwazurike, there is an awesome sale right now I think you guys should know about for Pat Surtain jerseys. Now, the blue uniforms might not be in your size, but the road white uniforms are in all sizes right now. So go to chatsports.com/Surtain jersey. I've included that link in the copy, the description, and the comment section of today's video. So if you want to get a Pat Surtain jersey at all, do it now because these sales on Fanatics come and go. And if you put it off for even 24, 48 hours, well, when you go back in 2 to 3 days, that sale's gone and now you're paying $20, $30 more dollars. So don't wait any longer. Get it right now if you're looking for a new number 2 jersey. Third option for replacing Uwazurike, everyone's favorite, trades. It's always fun to talk about trades. We're all suckers to it. They don't happen too often, but George Paton has proven that he is not afraid to pick up the phone. I'll preface with this. I don't see a big-name trade happening, right? It's not like their starting defensive tackle, Zach Allen or DJ Jones, got suspended. It would feel like a bit of overkill to make a big splash trade or at least a high-profile name or at least a recognizable name, even for your above-average NFL fan, to replace someone who is just going to be maybe at the very high end, the third guy in this 5-man rotation, 6-man rotation. But more likely, he was supposed to be that 4 to 5-man spot in this 6-man defensive line rotation. So if there is a trade, it's going to be like a low-level trade. I don't think you're going to see a big splash name. Now, there are some trade targets out there I want to bring up to your attention. Neville Gallimore is a guy for the Cowboys who, third-round pick, I believe, and he's been kind of like what Uwazurike was supposed to be, where someone who just never quite took that big step forward in their career and established themselves as a day one starter for all 17 games. Matthew Butler with the Raiders, you don't see divisional trades happen too often, but he kind of had some issues in Vegas last year, a healthy scratch for a large portion of the season. So maybe a change of scenery or maybe getting away from McDaniels would be good for him. Eddie Goldman is interesting. At one time, he was one of the best defensive tackles in football with the Chicago Bears back in 2018 when their defense looked like the monsters in the midway. The issue is that Goldman, the last 3 years, has only played one season. He opted out in 2020. He played below average in 2021. Then he was a free agent in the offseason of 2022, signed with the Falcons. 2 weeks later, he retires. Now, he has decided to come out of retirement, so he went back to Atlanta. But maybe the Falcons are like, dude, we kind of moved on from you. We don't have a spot for you on this roster. So there is a spot in Denver. Let's make a deal happen. Finally, this would be like a home run kind of reach trade if you're looking for something like that. Javon Kinlaw, former first-round pick for the 49ers, has never really been healthy, has not been consistent, he has not been reliable in the Bay Area. So if the 49ers are kind of looking to just move on from Kinlaw, maybe Denver would go, you know what, we still don't really have a long-term piece at defensive tackle, so let's take a chance on Javon Kinlaw. That one seems a bit more unlikely than the rest of them, but you never quite know with the Peyton duo. So who do you guys think should replace Eyioma Uwazurike? We went through some internal options, some free agents, some trades. Let me know in the comment section. It's always good to hear back from our reviewers here at the Broncos Breakdown who you think should replace the former Cyclone. To wrap up the show, you guys know the dealio by now. My summer hot takes to get us through the off season because you know what? Football's not back in the training camp. Football's not back in the preseason. Football is back week 1 against the Raiders. How do I know that? Because there was a whole different buzz about the regular season versus the preseason. But it is a high of 97 degrees, a heat wave coming through Denver right now. So this has to be a very hot first take hot. And my first take hot take is that the Rams do a complete blow up after this season, and they trade either Aaron Donald or Cooper Kupp. We're only 18 months removed from the Rams hoisting the Lombardi Trophy, but things have already kind of gotten a bit sour. At least some of the reports that were leaking this offseason between Stafford and the Rams, it just doesn't feel like things are going in the right direction, and they kind of look like, honestly, the 2015 Broncos at this point, where the next season was like, okay, I guess we're still okay, but not really. I mean, at least Denver the next year went above 500, but then very quickly things spiraled and things went downhill. and all of a sudden no one even thought of them as that, oh, team to compete, team to watch for in the playoffs. So I think the Rams are on that same path where, hey, Denver got a Super Bowl out of it. LA got a Super Bowl out of it. Everyone's happy, but I don't think it's going to be a long, consistent team to watch for in the NFC. So I could see a big blow up happening after this year. That will do it for us on today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed our content, consider subscribing. It would go a long way to help support the channel. Like the video, comment, all that good stuff. We'll see everyone later.